Hello everyone, it's Alan. So, as you may have noticed, this video is pretty long, so I apologize for that. But there is a reason why it's long, which is that it's something really important. This video is about something that is really key to my whole transition, and it's just complex. That's how it is. So, it was hard to cut much from it, but I hope you enjoy it because it's really important to me. So I hope that you find it interesting or maybe even relatable. If so, I'd be curious to hear about that. I am going to mention relationships in this video, including some emotional and somewhat intimate things. So, family members or past partners of mine, please respect me by not watching this video. If you're curious about what it involves other than those relationship things, let me know, and I'm totally happy to talk to you about it. Alright, well, thank you. Here is the video. Let me start off by telling you a bit of a story. Now, back in January 2009, which was about 7.5 years ago, I think, I had this memorable experience during an appointment with a psychiatrist that I saw just a handful of times. I was seeing this psychiatrist because I was kind of depressed, had some relationship stuff going on, whatever. So during this one appointment, towards the end of the appointment, he said to me or asked me, I can't remember which, if I had something like dark or scary or ugly to tell someone. And I was like, what? What the hell? Like, I was kind of shocked because that's not something that somebody would normally say. It felt kind of scary or weird or threatening or creepy, not in the sense that I thought he was doing anything creepy to me. It's just a weird thing to hear somebody say to you. I was unsettled. So then, very soon after that, during the same appointment, he said something like, now I know that we're dealing with the Jungian shadow, referring to the famous psychologist Carl Jung, spelled Jung, and his concept of the shadow. So my reaction to that was like, what the fuck? Like, what? It was just unsettling, kind of mysterious, and I actually felt kind of upset and angry because he had stressed me out by saying that, and it made me feel confused and made me feel like maybe I did have some darkness inside. Almost like I was being sort of accused of something in a really subtle way. Um, so it was not pleasant, and I'm not sure if I went back to him again for another visit after that. I might not have. I can't quite remember. So, after having that experience, I did look up what the shadow meant, and I think my point in this video is going to make a lot more sense and be more interesting if you know a little bit about what that means. So, let me tell you. I found a pretty useful article about it from Psychology Today, and I'll put the link to the article in the description of the video. So it says, I'm just going to excerpt little bits of it. It says, the shadow is the unknown dark side of our personality. Dark both because it tends to consist predominantly of the primitive, negative, socially or religiously depreciated human emotions and impulses like sexual lust, power strivings, selfishness, greed, envy, anger, or rage, and due to its unenlightened nature, which means not brought into the light in this case, completely obscured from consciousness. So the shadow is something that you're not consciously aware of very much. So whatever we deem evil, inferior, or unacceptable and deny in ourselves becomes part of the shadow. The shadow, wrote Jung, is that hidden, repressed, for the most part inferior and guilt-laden personality whose ultimate ramifications reach back into the realm of our animal ancestors. The shadow is a primordial part of our human inheritance, which, try as we might, can never be eluded or gotten away from. The pervasive Freudian defense mechanism known as projection is how most people deny their shadow, unconsciously casting it onto others so as to avoid confronting it in oneself. We see that all the time in the world. And the shadow is most destructive, insidious, and dangerous when habitually repressed and projected, manifesting in myriad psychological disturbances. Indeed, the shadow contains all those qualities we hide from ourselves and others, but which remain active within the unconscious, forming a sort of splinter personality. And the shadow, while very real, is not meant to be taken concretely or literally, like as an actual shadow that looks like a shadow. It's meant to be a metaphor. And it's within yourself. It's not something alien or external to yourself. Um, and this is huge for me. The shadow must never be dismissed as merely evil or demonic, for it contains natural, life giving, underdeveloped positive potentialities too. Coming to terms with the shadow and constructively accepting and assimilating it into the conscious personality is central. Okay, so going back to my own experience, so I was looking at my journal because I did write about this back when it happened, which is good because that gives me some insight. So in my journal, I wrote, I'm not really in touch with my shadow unless you count things like envisioning beating men up, and then I mentioned a couple other things. So that's kind of interesting. Now, looking back, I do think it's true that I wasn't totally in touch with my shadow, and I think it's interesting that I mentioned in my journal back then having visions of beating men up, and I think that that points to a really big chunk of my shadow as it was back then. And I interpret this as indicating my really high levels of jealousy towards men, like subconscious jealousy, or maybe you could call it some kind of bitterness. And then I also see this, this mentioning of beating men up, as also indicating a high level of resistance on my part against maleness or feeling male, or like a lot of rejection of any maleness that I might have subconsciously sensed within myself. Like, maleness felt wrong to me on some level. Like, it felt gross or monstrous. So I had this urge, I guess, to kind of smash it out. And maleness felt gross to me then most of the time because, like, due to my bitterness, due to my fear or something, or my lack of understanding of the male realm of existence, due to my lack of understanding myself, it's like I viewed males as these big oafs who are hairy, ugly, and brutish, smelly, irritating, loud, violent, capable of rape, oblivious to the concerns of women, disgusting, entitled, greedy, people who just take and not give. Of course, now in my own life, I knew some men who were really awesome and really nice, but that just goes to show how much sort of weird resistance and anger and animosity was going on in my mind because of my own issues. So, with this kind of tinged conception of men, how could I ever feel male or come to the conclusion that I was trans or that I was male? I couldn't because maleness seemed so awful. So, that kind of worked as a subconscious wall to keep me separated from this shadow. So, um, I think that a lot of the reason why this happened to me is that probably this rejection and abhorrence towards men occurred because we're taught that it's wrong to be trans, it's wrong to, or even perverted to like want to be the opposite sex. Um, and then if I were to realize that I felt male but didn't have a male body, I mean, I would feel really sad and maybe despairing or depressed. So I guess my brain found it easier to have this negativity and kind of hatred, maybe, towards maleness, rather than to accept my own situation, which might make me sad and depressed. Could be. So I think that what I've just described there, this animosity, was a really huge part of my shadow, like something buried within myself, unacknowledged, resisted, covered up to the point that I didn't even know that it was really there. Um, and then it also involved my projection of my self fear onto other people, like men. All of that is a lot of how shadows work, according to Carl Jung's ideas. So I've talked about this animosity towards men, but what else was there to my shadow? Well, let me tell you about what seems to me to be the central key part of it, like key part of it that I experienced and learned to accept and embrace as part of my decision to transition. So here's another story. I had this one intimate partner. When I was with her, like we just organically, somewhat smoothly moved towards this physical dynamic together where I would be doing things in what you might think of as a male way. So I'm talking about a sexual relationship here. Like I would be doing things with her like in a male way, a male sort of position, so to speak, with male terminology. And I had done things before in the past, but something about this one person and our connection, the spark, just the way that we related to each other, or something like that. And then also her desire for me to really bring out this male energy part of myself, all of that led me to plunge really deeply into embodying this male energy and male instincts that I had within myself. Um, Whereas in the past, when I tried that, it had just been like dabbling. So basically, in this experience that I'm talking about, I was able to kind of let loose and was able to act sexually as male to a much greater extent and with more abandon than I had before. Now, this wasn't an entirely smooth transformation because I did have some guilt and other things. Like, I had to talk with her a lot about my hesitation, my guilt. I was often afraid that the more heterosexual and not so much lesbian sex that we were having would be like physically uncomfortable for her. And I was concerned that it might feel like demeaning for her to just to get that into having sex with her with my dick. You know, I'm talking about a strap on here, okay? So I felt like dicks, penises, were just sort of inherently rapey, to put it bluntly. So it took me a while to get past that. She had to reassure me a lot. Um, and then also, a big stumbling block for me was that I feared that maybe she would be turned off or end up not wanting me if I was doing things in this male way and kind of identifying as male in these moments with her. Um, or that she would be turned off if we were using this male terminology about myself and parts. Because it's like, I mean, even though she was queer, sort of along the lines of being bisexual, my body was technically female. It's like she was seemingly wanting to be with a female because that's technically what I was. You know, this is how it went in my mind. So then, if suddenly I was feeling male or doing things in a male way, I thought, oh, well, that doesn't seem like what she may have wanted coming into this because I'm technically female, so maybe she will end up being turned off. And I feared that in past relationships too. I feared that maybe not only would she not be attracted to the whole male thing, but that she might find it distasteful or rapey or something, basically. But after a lot of talking and just further experiences with this particular partner, she was able to convince me that she was actually really into it, and that she even understood that it was completely right for me, and that it was me, and that it was this real me that she wanted and that she felt connected with. So that was incredibly powerful. I mean, it was a monumental awakening for me, truly. So her desire and love for me allowed me to trust myself and to love myself, really, and to bring that shadow into the light and to see it for what it was, not something monstrous, but something that actually gave me life. And these things might sound cheesy, but it is really true. I mean, it's I can hardly express how powerful it was and how much it changed my life. So basically, what I was just telling about, that's kind of how I knew I was trans. I mean, there are so many more other, like, mundane aspects of my journey, too, like researching what it means to be trans, researching transition, watching YouTube videos, talking with a therapist. Those things were all really important, too, for sure. But embracing this shadow part of myself felt like the key that finally turned the lock, and that's what gave me clarity and joy, I would say, even. Yeah. So, this clarity, this joy is even more solid and consistent for me now that I'm on T and I've transitioned, even though things did not end up going well with this partner, and um, we had some troubles. It's a long story I'm not going to get into, but I still have that, like, spirit, that energy, that real self within me, which allows me to feel much stronger than I had felt before. So, all is not lost. The real power of accepting yourself, accepting your shadow, and unifying yourself, unifying all that's within you, rather than rejecting part of yourself and remaining fractured, that has so much power to unify yourself. It makes you feel stronger even when you're alone. For me, accepting my shadow and acknowledging it makes it kind of not a shadow anymore because you bring it into the light. But for me, doing that um, makes me feel connected with what I call spirit or life force. It makes me feel happier in my life than I ever did before, really. And it means being connected to and grounded in my body. It makes me be open to really feeling my body and its energy. Like, this physical feeling of male energy running through my body is like an anchor. It's like a physical anchor that I can use to help pull myself out of moments of depression, even. Now, I'm not saying I'm never ever depressed. I'm just saying that this sort of physical energy anchor, it makes things just so much better than it was without that. Also, Previously, in the past, not allowing myself to feel, be, or identify as male meant not having full access to my spirit, as I call it. Like, for me, spirit and body are intertwined and inseparable. So, not being in touch with one or both of those is really likely to make you feel depressed, since they're essential elements of your being. You don't want to be alienated from them.
Hold on. Let me interject for a second here. I was thinking after I made this video of another way of putting this. So let me add this right here. I feel that the part of myself that you might call the more animal part, and also the spirit part, which I view as very much related, those are male. It really feels very deeply male in a primal way. And so that is or was what I would think of as my shadow, because in the past I had been keeping it in the dark, really, kind of subconsciously. So then when I was able to bring that out and accept it and have that come to the forefront, that meant realizing who I really was and realizing that transition was something that I needed to do. And it was a quick realization, but also it was kind of an ongoing realization, because now that I'm on testosterone and as time goes by, I just feel that sense of correctness even more, and I feel even more that I am able to continue to get in more touch with myself on all these different levels. Like more in touch with this shadow side, or what used to be the shadow side. And now, back to the rest of the video.
So for me, testosterone is actually a big part of all this. A big part of my continued process of integrating what used to be my shadow. For me, testosterone is like a catalyst, a key that turns the lock in the correct way in order to give me access to all parts of my being, mind, body, spirit. When my hormone was estrogen, those elements were not in alignment. It's like the channel of my being was muddied and the spirit couldn't flow freely through me. Again, sounds cheesy, but completely true. To use sort of a silly analogy, for me it's like being on estrogen was like dairy for a lactose intolerant person. It just did not make things work properly. So, to be more specific, testosterone has adjusted my sex drive, raised it. So, it actually feels like more of a match for my spirit for whatever reason, and it helps lift me out of depression, actually. It works really well for that a lot of times. And also, testosterone has kind of adjusted or altered my physical sensation down there, adjusted its location, focal point, intensity. So it just feels more correct now. It makes my body more understandable to me, even though I don't have like a what you would think of as the typical male dick, obviously. Um, and whereas on estrogen, I typically mostly had a desire for a partner to do things to me, to do the action to me, basically. But now, testosterone makes me have overwhelmingly more drive to do the actions to my partner. And it's interesting because this actually makes sex for me more energizing, more spiritual, more meaningful than before, and particularly it feels just more fitting. Um, More fitting. I mean, it's hard to describe other than saying that. It feels like that is kind of what all of the pieces of myself were put together to do. And I feel that even when I'm just by myself. Um, Testosterone gives my body instructions that work well with my brain and my spirit, so to speak. It's like my brain and spirit were designed to do what testosterone gives them the drive to do, if that makes sense. And again, everything is in alignment, whereas with estrogen it wasn't really. So, to use an analogy, another sort of funny one, it's kind of like this. It's like my brain and my spirit on estrogen is like using Alaskan sled dogs to do sheep herding. They're probably not that good at their task because they're bred, they have instincts for running endless miles with a sled, not for herding sheep. And they probably wouldn't enjoy it that much. They probably don't feel as instinctually in tune with herding sheep as they would for being sled dogs, what they were bred for. Um, and so also, I'm gonna use a dog analogy in another way to emphasize to you guys that this shadow or animalistic side, which is a good way of thinking about it, my male side, it's not animalistic in the sense of being monstrous or violent or anything like that. Like embracing your shadow or the animal within does not mean running rampant and tearing people's heads off or anything like that. I mean, think of dogs. They love to run around, frolic, play, roll in the dirt, wrestle, chase, eat things, have sex, hump things, if they get the chance. So, all of those things can seem really wild, right? But do these dogs go berserk to the extent of just attacking at will? No, no. Or for the majority, the vast majority, no. Their wildness is not about depraved violence. It's about doing things that feel good and having fun with other dogs or people. So, I mean, actually, that's somewhat similar to how my animal side feels to me. And it's important to note here that I consider my shadow to be a gift because when I took it out of the dark into the light, it changed my life and led me to take steps to be who I am today. And being in touch with these deep parts of myself makes me feel so much more alive and real and happy than I used to. And I let go of so much negativity and jealousy, bitterness. And I've learned that things that seem horrible and scary to us are often actually not that horrible and scary and can even be life giving, like being transitioning. Going where your desire and drive lead you to go is life giving, in my experience anyway. Now, in closing, just to mention a more mundane thing, I'm more able to and interested in doing things like watching scary movies, reading scary books. I've been able to do more of that than before. Before, I was just really easily scared by these things, and I tried to avoid them, and I wasn't that interested. But well, I still do get scared by horror movies, of course, but not to the like really deep, deep extent that I was before. And I just find scary things more interesting than I did before. So it is really a noticeable shift. So I think that's connected to all that I was talking about. So I just thought that was an interesting tidbit to share with you. Um, so thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to this. Um, I'd be really curious to hear if anybody has any similar experiences or um, what you think about this, or if you can relate, or if you have questions. I'd be really interested to hear. All right. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you later. Bye.